one's going to have the great-great-grandchild, Robert, yeah. Mama's got it. Have you played instruments?
Me? Are you musical?
Years ago now. I can't remember what year. And this picture, my brother, was because they had a crew cut. And they're the same 6'1". I'd like to tell you where my parents come from. 1898, Daddy was born in Waverly, Kentucky. And in 1998, Mother was born in Henderson, Kentucky. And her last maiden name was Hendrickson. But there was 8 in her family, and Daddy was the oldest of 13. And when they got married, he told me, and Mother did too, that he was looking for a wife. And at that time, he was about 22 years old. He couldn't find a woman to go out with at all in Waverly, so he went to Henderson and found Mother. And when they got married, it was January the 6th of 1918. And right away, my mother, there was 8 in her family. Right away, she said, "John, I want to have a baby," you know. He said, "Well, let's hold off now." Well, time went on, and she said, "John, I want to adopt." "No, let's hold off now. It's not just right." And he said, "I'd like to go to Louisville and start working, because there's nothing hardly here in Waverly." And so when they moved to Louisville, it was I was the firstborn, but they had already had Eleanor and Clyde and Ernest William, who died at birth, and then J.B., John Benedict, and my father's name was John W. Hancock. So then after J.B. was born, then here come me, Agnes Ernestine. The brother that died was Ernest William, but I never did like my name. But when I was born, J.B., my brother, who was 2 years old, could not say little sister. He said Biddy sister. So Biddy stuck all these years. And then there was Angela and Lowell and Jimmy and Rita. Mother always liked to live in near a church. It was either St. Anthony's or St. Columba. So when it was St. Columba, I started to go to first grade at St. Anthony's. We lived 25th and Jefferson. And at that time, the flood, 1937 flood happened. And me and my sister, one Christmas, got a Shirley Temple doll. And we had to go by bus to Eminence, Kentucky, because it was flooded all over Louisville. And we had a terrace at 25th and Jefferson, and the water just got in the first floor and ruined our Shirley Temple dolls. I don't know why we didn't take them with us or put them up or something. And then we got back into the house, and Mother, I started me at first grade at St. Anthony's. And at that time, I really remember walking home from St. Anthony's, and that was like 4 blocks or so from St. Anthony's Church to 25th and Jefferson. And then after we moved from there, we lived and Mother always wanted to rent. Daddy wanted to buy. And really the house my mother wanted was at 34th and Jefferson, right across the street with St. Columba, where all of us went to school then, all 8 of us. And at that time, tuition was $2 for one child, because nuns were all there. And if you had 10 kids, $2.50. On Michigan, where we lived, I think I was about 7 years old. I remember the outhouse. And Daddy would keep, just keep the flies away, and the white powder, I forgot what the name of it is, but it was clean. And what we used for toilet paper, Sears and Roebuck catalog. Now that wasn't very pleasant. Maybe you ought to cut that out, but I think it's life, to use everybody back then, they couldn't afford toilet paper with 8 kids. And everybody I knew had 8 kids. At that time, Daddy still had a job, but it was a long time before. So what he would do was the water went down, but he'd get on the street at Christmas time or before Christmas and buy little dolls and sell them a little bit higher to try and get bread on the table or something, And if he hadn't had, and he was a workaholic. He was hyper as I am. He was a talker, but I never got to talk until I met Lloyd. He said, you got to start talking, whatever. So this one time in the 7th grade, there was one fella, Wilbur Gunn was his name, and he was the clown of the class, and I thought it was cute. We all thought he was funny, but the nuns didn't think he was so darn funny. I got to tell this. Wilbur whistled, one whistle. Sister Margaret said, who is that? And we all knew who that was. And he stood up and she said, we'll have no more of that. Right after that, now, I want to tell you, I was a good whistler. I could warble. And I whistled one whistle. She said, now who was that? And I raised my hand, stood up. She said, Agnes Ernestine, the Blessed Virgin is crying because a young lady does not whistle. I thought to myself, and when you get home from lunch, you're going to be punished. In those days, they used a ruler on your hands. And I went home and I was crying. I told Mother what I did. And she said, well, go on, eat your lunch. She snuck and called Sister Margaret and said, what kind of punishment you're going to give her? A written one. So I went on back. If it was going to be with the ruler, I was not going back. That was the 7th grade. Across the street from me was Father, I forgot it, Spalding, and a woman that was married was chaperones to the Chumba Club. It was a teen club, but you couldn't join till you were 16. Well, we had a long porch with a ladder on it and a rather big house renting from this person. Anyway, I was swinging in this ladder, and I said, Mother, I can't wait. Another half year. I'll be 16, and I can just walk across to the Chumba Club. And my brother, Jim, JB, who called me Biddy, Mom, don't let her go over there. And she said, why? Said, I don't know. I just, brothers and sisters didn't practically get along too well, but we did. But he didn't. When he dated, I shined his shoes. I was getting ready to become a hairdresser. And when he washed his hair, I combed his hair and put a wave in it, whatever. But anyway, I went ahead and went on to 16. I went over to Chumba Club, and actually it was a jukebox. But in the 40s, this music was beautiful. They've never written so many beautiful songs as in the 40s and 50s. Frank Sinatra and all those guys. But anyway, then I left, I went on the 2nd year to presentation. And that's all I needed to go take a cosmetologist course, Kentucky Beauty College. And Mother and Daddy didn't have the money. It was $75 for the whole 6 months. And you were learning about the head. You thought you was going to learn to be a doctor. The cranium, the this and that, and you had to take the test to pass. And then after I passed, I worked in a Starks building in town called the Bohart. And that was a beauty salon. So I worked there for a long time. Here I was, 4 years younger. He was already, when we married, when I met him, I was 18, he was 22, 4 years older, whatever. Got out of service. And, but I fell for him right away. So I said to my sister after he left, if he's still looking for somebody to date, mention me. No, Biddy, he's too old for you. That's all she said. Well, It wasn't about a month or two later, Easter. So I got on the streetcar and was going shopping, to Bohart and whatever, Bonton, Selman's, all those town. Well, there wasn't no malls, see, in that time. So I got on the streetcar, and who's sitting in the front seat was Lloyd and a beautiful redhead. I thought, well, that goes my dream. I went back and sit down. Well, it was about, I guess about a week later, and it was Easter at that time. He called up. He said, "Hey, gal," he said, "would you want to go out riding?" He had a car that had a running board on it, see? And I said, I wanted to say, yes, but I said, I'm getting ready to, and I had long bleached blonde hair. And I said, I'm getting ready to wash my hair. He said, "I got an idea. You can stand on the running board and get it dry." So then we started dating, and then he'd pick me up. I'd work late at the beauty shop, and he'd pick me up late at night, And one thing, while we were dating, if I dated Lloyd on a Sunday, you got to go to benediction first. They had benediction back then. I thought, I can't do that. I mean, we've gone to church on a Sunday morning. He was Catholic, thank God. And then to go that night to benediction, I never made a date on a Sunday with him. We went to a lot of dancing and movies. But when we go out dancing, thank God Lloyd loved to dance. We jitterbug and dance, but he didn't like the waltz. He said, "That's a sissy kind of dance." I said, "No, it's a beautiful dance, but he never would waltz." And then August the 21st of 48, we got married. But Mother and Daddy couldn't afford a wedding gown. I borrowed my girlfriend's. She's let me use it, and then I had it cleaned. But then I kept working for a while, and then I said, "Honey, I want a baby. I want to, because I couldn't seem to get pregnant, for 3 or 4 months or so." And he said, "Well, okay." So at that time, he worked in a neon service, neon factory or whatever, where he made neon signs. And then he got laid off. Then him and his buddies went to, and I found out I was pregnant with Danny, and they went to New York to work in neon because he couldn't find a job in Louisville. And then I asked the doctor, he said, "I asked the doctor if you can, ride a bus to New York." And then he said no. He said the only way you can go is, because I was 7 months pregnant with Danny. And he said, "The only way you can go is fly." So he met me there, and I stayed with the lady who was very good and charged me nothing. But she had leftover fish for breakfast. And I said, "Lloyd, get me a box of cereal." I said, "I can't eat no cold fish," or whatever. But we weren't there, but come home right before the baby was born, and I was 7 months then. And 50, Butch was born 11 and a half months later. But to hurry up and get Danny on his feet, Lloyd would hold at 3 months, and he had stiff legs, held him up, and he had stiff legs. At 8 months, Danny was walking. At 8 and a half months, he was running through Shawnee Park, and I had to catch him, but I was real big with Butch, whatever. And Butch was a little longer than that. I think he's about 9 and a half months walking or something like that. But we had to get him out of the way. Whatever. I mean, ready for another one. And right before they went in service, Danny decided to go ahead in the Air Force. He's 18, I think, or close to 19. And Butch come to me about a week later and said, "Mom, I'm going in with him." I did not cry. I was about ready to say, "No, you can't go," but I didn't say a word because I thought, look, they're so close, and they've been so close. I got to stop. They've been so close all their life. And Danny said a couple years ago, "Mom, if Butch happens to pass away, I can't stand it. I won't be able to stand it. I asked the Lord to take me first." I said, "Danny, we all don't know when we're going to be taken. I said, I pray every day he take me before he take my sons. But if he wants me, I'm his child. And I said, we're all lent our children. We're not going to keep them forever. And but he's just so, and he really thought, and when Butch had 2 years ago that operation, we were up there, and his friends left, 4 or 5 of them. He's got so many friends, Connie and Tim and whatever. They said, we're going to go. They're getting ready to take you down, Butch. We'll stay here and wait till you come down. It's just me and Carol. Butch was laying there in the bed. He flung himself onto Butch, and he said, but Bubba, I love you, and I wish it was me going in, you know. And that started me crying. And after they took Butch, we went in the hall, and Carol went and I think sit down in a restroom, you know, where you wait for people. Mom, why did I cry? I said, hold it. Why do you think God gave you tears? God cried at Lazarus, his friend's death. He was human. I said, Danny, let it out. That's the only way you get relief. And he cries as anything funny and anything sad, whatever. But I only cry when I see somebody crying on television. I don't cry unless it's something like this. But so anyway, Butch says, Mom, I'm going with Danny. They told them when they took him, you'll stay, I'll keep you together. I started praying right away. I didn't tell them. Don't keep them together, because the Sullivan brothers, 5 brothers died in the Second World War on a ship when, what was it? They got bombed from Japan. But once they did leave for Air Force, I was just depressed, and they didn't know it, and write to them all the time, send them a little bit of money or whatever, and then go down the basement, do my wash, and beat the heck out of Danny's drums, and just to hear music. But anyway, it all turned out, and they married who they wanted. So we've got a beautiful family. We really have. You know, and since they went in business in '86, as my mother-in-law was dying, they said, Mom, Grandma, we're going in business. They were dressed up, and they had the same outfits on, a beige sport coat, the brown tie, and whatever. And when they were little, I dressed them alike. And Danny had sort of blonde, dishwater blonde hair, and I put a wave in his hair. You know? And Butch kidded me as he was growing up. He said, yeah, I was supposed to be a girl, I bet. Huh, Mom? I said, well, yeah, I was hoping for one. But right after that, I got, with my sister-in-law, I told Lloyd, I said, I want a car if I pass, and I want it now, after I pass my, learn to be a car. But he said, don't I take you everywhere? Don't I take you everywhere? I said, yes. I said, then I'm going swimming with her, learn to swim. And he said, all right. And I said, now, after I pass, I want a car. And I don't care if it's a Jeep or a bicycle or whatever. I've got to have transportation because you're 4 years older. But we had love in our family. We had love in my family, but there was no hugging or telling you, that's a good job, honey, or whatever. They were strictly doing their job, and they did it great, and they was teaching us right from wrong. You had to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, please, yes, sir. 1998 was our 50th anniversary. 1999, Lloyd started thinking differently, and I knew he should know it. So me and Danny took him to U of L, and there Dr. Jane Thiebaud tested him, gave him 3 tests, written and numbers and figures. He passed those, but he couldn't tell her who was the vice president. She said, I'm pretty sure he's coming down with Alzheimer's. But he just was so sweet. And then one night in bed, I think this was cute. I was sitting up watching television, and he rolled over like he was going to sleep, and then he turned over and he said, honey, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah, what? He said, did we do something to have babies? I said, we sure did. Then he turned back over, and then he turned back over, and he said, honey, can I ask you the same thing over and again, see? And I said, yeah. Then one time I was in the living room, and he went to the restroom, and as you come out of the restroom, on the wall is the kids from babyhood to about 15, 16. about 8 pictures. He said, come here, come here. I thought he fell. I thought, oh my gosh. I read in there, and he said, did we have all these children? I said, we sure did. You gotta just go along with them, you know what I'm saying? But and in the mornings as a child, he would, when we wake up, he would look at me. He said, Biddy, didn't remember the children's name. It was his brother's name. He said, Biddy, you're beautiful. I thought to myself, where in the hell have you been for the last 60 years? And I shouldn't have said hell. Knock that out. Take that out. For my future generation, well, I hope and pray that they know the Lord. I hope they are as sweet and religious as the people that's gone before them, because I know that they were religious and knew the Lord and knew what was right and wrong. But keep remembering that we all are God's children and we're all aiming for the same place. And hope you all are as good as your relatives were before you. And love you all. That was that. Now I'm ready for this. I'd like to mention what wonderful boys I've got. The most blessed blessing I've ever received is from God when He sent me my husband and my 2 sweet, loving, generous, religious, thoughtful sons, and also, I think, handsome. Plus, they have humility and class. In other words, their mother thinks they're almost saints, but God may have something to say about that. I do thank God for my life and my family every day. Also, I am trying to love every one of His children. It's kind of hard, but God knows best. Love everybody.